She had not sung in months. In Auschwitz, the sound of a human voice was usually a cry, not a melody. Yet, on an autumn evening in 1942, a young Slovak Jew named Helena Citrónová stood among exhausted prisoners and let a song slip out of her throat. It was a song she remembered from home, from a world that no longer existed. She believed it might be the last time she would ever sing. Among the SS guards overseeing the warehouse where prisoners sorted the stolen belongings of the dead was Franz Wunsch, a 20-something Austrian who had arrived in Auschwitz earlier that year. He had watched countless inmates pass under his command with cold detachment. But when Helena's voice rose in the stale air, something in him halted. He stared at her as if seeing a living person for the first time. When the song ended, he approached her. His request was strange, almost impossible to believe inside a death camp. He quietly asked her to sing again. Helena froze. She knew that a guard's attention could mean danger, punishment, or death. But there was no cruelty in his expression, only a disarming softness that frightened her even more. She later recalled wondering how a man who served in a place built to destroy could look at her with eyes that did not match his uniform. To understand how she had reached this moment, singing for an SS guard in a place designed to erase her existence, one must go back to her life before the barbed wire. Helena Citrónová was born on the 26th of August 1922 in Humene, in the eastern part of Czechoslovakia. Her father served as a cantor, and her childhood was filled with music, community, and a sense of belonging. But by the late 1930s, the rise of fascism in the region began to shatter the world she knew. Anti-Jewish policies in the Slovak state escalated rapidly after 1939, stripping families like hers of their rights, livelihoods, and safety. By early 1942, deportations were no longer rumors. On 25th March of that year, at just 19, Helena was forced onto the first official transport of Slovak Jewish women and girls sent to Auschwitz. Told they would perform temporary labor, they were sent instead into the machinery of mass murder. Months later, in the unlikely setting of the camp's sorting warehouses, known bitterly as Canada for their relative abundance, her voice would draw the attention of a man whose unexpected fixation would alter the course of her survival. And it was only the beginning. If you enjoy true World War II stories and want to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing to the channel. Before the war reached her doorstep, Helena's life followed the quiet rhythm of a small Jewish community in eastern Czechoslovakia. She grew up surrounded by song. Her father's voice filled their home during Sabbath evenings, and Helena absorbed every melody with natural ease. Those who knew her remembered a bright, spirited girl who loved to sing and dance and imagined that one day she might leave Humene to explore the wider world. But after the creation of the Slovak state in March 1939, daily life changed at a startling pace. New decrees targeted Jewish families. Businesses were seized, movement was restricted, and professions were closed off. By 1941, the Jewish Code, one of the harshest collections of anti-Jewish laws in Europe, had stripped Helena's family of nearly every civil right. Each regulation arrived with a numbing regularity, yet the reality behind them was clear. The Slovak authorities aligned themselves closely with Nazi Germany, and the walls were closing in. In early 1942, the government agreed to deport its Jewish population to German-controlled territory. Young women were selected first. Officials assured them that they were being sent for work service, a temporary measure to support the war effort. Many believed it, or tried to. The alternative was too terrifying to imagine. On 25th March 1942, Helena was pushed into a transport of nearly 1,000 girls and unmarried women. It was the first mass transport of Slovak Jews to Auschwitz. Most were teenagers. They carried small bundles, each convinced they would return home within months. The train journey lasted days, filled with heat, exhaustion, and the rising dread of a destination none of them understood. When the doors finally slid open, the girls stepped into a place that felt stripped of all warmth. Auschwitz-Birkenau, a site that had begun receiving transports less than 2 years earlier, but was already expanding into the largest killing center of the Nazi regime. The prisoners were ordered to form lines. Their names were taken, their hair was shaved, and their belongings were confiscated. Helena, who had once been known for her beauty and spirited energy, became prisoner 10,572. Her early months in the camp were defined by hard labor. She was assigned to a demolition detail, responsible for tearing down abandoned structures to clear space for new facilities. The work was brutal. The prisoners lifted heavy debris for hours each day, forbidden from resting or even wiping sweat from their eyes without permission. Accidents were constant. The SS guards demanded speed over safety, and the collapsing walls sometimes crushed the girls working beside her. Helena slept in overcrowded barracks on thin, bug-infested straw. Disease spread easily, as did despair. Food consisted of watery soup, crusts of bread, and the occasional scrap of margarine. Each morning, the roll calls stretched endlessly, the prisoners forced to stand still in the cold until the guards were satisfied. Those who collapsed were beaten or dragged away. Yet despite the terror surrounding her, Helena held on to the one thing that had always belonged to her, her voice. She sang quietly to herself in moments when she could no longer bear the silence. Her life changed in late October 1942, when she was transferred to the warehouses where the possessions of deported Jews were brought after arrival. Prisoners referred to these storage buildings as Canada, a dark joke born from the belief that Canada represented abundance and opportunity. In truth, the warehouses simply provided slightly better conditions, work indoors, fewer beatings, and more access to clothing and food scraps found among the confiscated belongings. For Helena, the change meant physical relief but emotional torment. Each item she touched, a child's shoe, a handwritten letter, a faded family photograph, belonged to someone who had likely been murdered in the gas chambers only hours before. Sorting these remnants felt like standing on the edge of the abyss. It was there, in the surreal quiet of the Canada warehouses, that Helena's path crossed again with Franz Wunsch, the SS guard who had heard her sing. She noticed the odd way he looked at her, with a mixture of curiosity and something she could not yet name. In a place where compassion rarely survived, the attention of a guard was a threat she could not ignore. Yet she would soon learn that this attention, dangerous, complicated, and morally fraught, would become the thin line between her life and her death. The next months would test every instinct she possessed. The first time Franz Wunsch approached Helena in the Canada warehouses, she braced herself for a reprimand. Prisoners learned quickly that being noticed by an SS guard rarely led to anything good. But his tone was strangely restrained. He asked her name, then thanked her for singing. She gave him only brief answers. The less he knew, the safer she would be. Yet, he returned the next day, and the day after that. At first, Helena assumed he was toying with her. The guard's whims dictated life and death. A smile could hide cruelty. But Wunsch behaved differently from the others. He lingered by her sorting table, asking whether she had enough food, speaking to her in a voice far gentler than she had ever heard from someone in SS uniform. She watched him warily, wondering what he wanted. Power? Manipulation? Or something even more dangerous? The reality soon became clear. Wunsch was infatuated with her. He began slipping her small items. An extra piece of bread, a scarf found in the confiscated luggage, a bit of soap. These were gestures that could have condemned them both. SS regulations forbade personal contact with prisoners, and any hint of affection was treated as treason. If discovered, he could have been executed. Helena could have been tortured or shot without question. Yet, he persisted, and his persistence placed her in a moral trap she could not escape. She despised the uniform he wore. She had seemed too much to trust him. But in Auschwitz, where starvation and disease were constant, and where a single day of weakness could mean death, these small gifts were not luxuries, they were lifelines. She accepted them out of necessity, and necessity blurred the line between survival and complicity. Helena tried to keep her distance, but Wunsch refused to remain a nameless guard in her world. He told her he was born in Vienna, that he had joined the SS in search of stability during turbulent times, and that he now regretted much of what he had seen. Whether these admissions reflected genuine remorse or a desire to appear sympathetic, she could not know. She only understood that he was determined to see her as a person, an act forbidden in a place built to deny humanity. When Helena fell ill with typhus, the situation escalated. Most prisoners who contracted the disease were sent to the camp hospital, a place that offered little treatment and frequent selections. Wunsch intervened before she could be transferred. He hid her in a storage corner of the warehouse, bringing her water and smuggling bits of food to keep her alive. There were moments when she drifted in and out of consciousness, half aware of him checking her pulse, half certain she might not survive until morning. Against all odds, she recovered. He congratulated her quietly, as if her survival were an intimate victory they shared. But for Helena, the recovery brought new fear. She now owed her life to a man whose uniform represented everything she loathed. Gratitude mixed with dread, and dread mixed with the uncomfortable truth that she no longer saw him with the same clarity as before. Over the next months, Wunsch's protectiveness grew. He warned her about upcoming inspections, redirected harsh overseers away from her workstation, and intervened when another guard struck one of her friends. Helena saw both sides of him, the tender one who slipped food into her hand when no one was looking, and the brutal one who enforced discipline among male prisoners with unquestioning severity. His compassion never extended to everyone, only to her, and that selectiveness haunted her. She struggled with a question she could not ask aloud. Could a man be both a perpetrator and a savior? For most inmates, such contradictions did not exist. SS men were agents of terror, not individuals to be examined. Yet Wunsch placed Helena in a rare and terrible position. His protection insulated her from some of the worst dangers in the camp, but his attachment also isolated her from fellow prisoners, who viewed any association with a guard, voluntary or not, with suspicion. One night when he passed her a small note tucked inside a piece of cloth, she opened it with trembling hands. In it, he had written a single confession, whispering, "Ich habe mich in dich verliebt. I have fallen in love with you." The words terrified her. Love had no place in Auschwitz. It was a luxury long buried beneath the ash that drifted across the camp. She told herself it could not be real. A guard did not love a prisoner. A prisoner could not return such feelings without losing herself. And yet, despite every argument she repeated in her mind, she felt something shifting within her. Not love, not in the way she had once imagined it, but a fragile thread of connection formed in a world that crushed all human ties. In Auschwitz, survival often depended on impossible choices. Her relationship with Wunsch, unwanted, dangerous, morally tangled, became one of those choices. Whether she wished it or not, his obsession became the shield that kept her alive. But Auschwitz was relentless, and the fragile balance between them would soon be tested in a way neither could control. The fragile arrangement that had kept Helena alive could not last forever. Auschwitz was a place where chance unraveled even the most carefully guarded secrets, and in the summer of 1944, the secret that bound her to Wunsch collided with the one thing she feared more than discovery: the arrival of someone she loved. Her older sister Rosika was deported from Slovakia along with her 9-year-old daughter and newborn son. When Helena overheard another prisoner, the names of new arrivals from her hometown, she ran toward the crematorium area in panic. She had seen countless transports end there. She knew that mothers with small children were usually sent directly to the gas chambers. By the time she reached the selection site, she saw the smoke rising from nearby chimneys and felt the despair tightening around her. She rushed forward, begging the guards to let her join her sister if they were to die. It was an act of desperation that could have cost her life. Someone alerted Wunsch. He appeared suddenly, his expression strained in a way she had never seen. To anyone watching, he was punishing her for breaking camp rules. But between the blows he leaned close, demanding her sister's name before it was too late. Breathless, she told him. Then she warned him that her sister had arrived with 2 children. His reply was blunt, as though he were forcing the truth out before emotion could stop him. Children could not survive in Auschwitz. He ran toward the crematorium area. Minutes felt like hours. When he returned, he told Helena that he had succeeded in removing her sister from the line of those marked for death by claiming she was needed for work in the Canada warehouses. But he could do nothing for the children. That decision had already been sealed. For Helena, the knowledge that her nephews had perished in the gas chambers while her sister was spared was a wound that never closed. The relief of saving one life collided with the horror of losing 2, and every memory of Wunsch's help became laced with bitterness. Rumors of her connection to a guard spread among prisoners. Envy, suspicion, and misunderstanding replaced the solidarity she once shared with others. Eventually, the SS took notice. Helena was interrogated about her relationship and beaten when she refused to admit anything. She understood that a confession would mean execution for both of them. Silence was the only weapon she possessed. Meanwhile, the war began turning decisively against Germany. By late 1944, Soviet forces were advancing toward Poland. The atmosphere in Auschwitz shifted. Guards grew fearful, prisoners whispered of liberation, and the camp's leadership planned evacuations to cover the evidence of mass murder. As the Red Army approached in January 1945, the SS began clearing the camp. Many prisoners were forced on death marches. In the chaos, Wunsch found Helena one final time. Their last conversation was brief, spoken in the cold air near the warehouses that had shaped both their lives. He told her he hoped she would survive, and that he had done everything he could. She said nothing in return. There was nothing left to say. Before leaving, he embraced her in a moment that felt out of place in a landscape of death. Then he walked away to join the retreating SS units, leaving Helena to face whatever came next. On 27th January 1945, Soviet troops entered Auschwitz. The gates that had trapped her for nearly 3 years stood open. Helena, exhausted but alive, stepped into a world that was forever changed, carrying a story that few would believe and even fewer would understand. When the gates of Auschwitz opened, Helena stepped out carrying little more than her name and the memories she wished she could abandon. Liberation did not feel like victory. It felt like waking from a nightmare, only to discover the world outside had also collapsed. Most of her family was gone. Her parents had been murdered. Her brother had died attempting to escape the camp. Only her sister survived beside her, hollowed by grief. In the months that followed, Helena rebuilt herself slowly. She married a fellow survivor who had devoted his life to the Zionist movement, and together they left Europe for the new life forming in Israel. She raised 2 children there, keeping her past tucked away, sharing it only when necessary and never in full detail. The name Franz Wunsch faded into a quiet corner of her mind, a chapter too painful and too complicated to revisit. But Wunsch had not forgotten her. After the war, he searched for her through old camp contacts and refugee networks. He wrote letters she refused to answer. Eventually, he settled in Austria, married, and attempted to build a life far from the ruins of Auschwitz. Yet, the past returned in 1972, when he was put on trial in Vienna for crimes committed as an SS guard. One day, Helena received a plea not from him, but from his wife. She begged Helena to testify, believing her husband's life depended on it. The request stirred emotions Helena had spent decades trying to bury. She had seen him act with cruelty in the camp. She had also seen him risk his life to save hers and her sister's. Both truths existed at once, and neither erased the other. After long hesitation, Helena traveled to Vienna. In the courtroom, she spoke without embellishment. She described the moments when Wunsch had shielded her from death, and she also acknowledged the violence she had witnessed him inflict on other prisoners. Her testimony revealed a man shaped by a system built on brutality, who had shown humanity selectively, and only where his heart had chosen. When she spoke of her sister's children, the ones no one could save, her voice broke, and even Wunsch wept. Despite witness accounts of his participation in camp brutality, the court ultimately acquitted him. Responsibility in the ruins of the Holocaust was not always clear in legal terms, even when it was unmistakable in moral ones. Wunsch died in 2009 in Austria. Helena passed away 2 years earlier, in 2007, in Tel Aviv, at the age of 84. Their lives diverged after the war, yet the brief, impossible connection formed in Auschwitz remained part of Helena's story until her final days. It was a reminder that even in a place engineered for death, human emotion did not disappear. It simply became twisted by the world in which it was forced to survive. And so, the story of Helena Citrónová endures as one of the Holocaust's most unsettling paradoxes. A young woman who survived because a man devoted to a murderous regime chose to see her as human, even as millions around them were denied that same recognition.